Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. To the headlines. A week after massive Zionist aggression on Jenin refugee camp, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas paid his first visit in over a decade to the occupied West Bank city to announce its reconstruction. In a strong message against the plundering of natural resources in Western Sahara, European deputies voiced their opposition to the inclusion of Sahrawi territories in the illegal agreements between the European Union and Morocco. And at the final day of Vilnius summit, assurance that Ukraine's future in NATO and the new security guarantees arose to calm worries. U.S. Special Envoy for Climate John Kerry is in Beijing next week to discuss strategies for curbing global warming. Starting from the local matter, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, will pay a state visit to the friendly Republic of China starting from next Monday, July 17, at the invitation of his counterpart, Xi Jinping. The visit aims to strengthen the deep-rooted bilateral relations and consolidate economic cooperation between the two countries and peoples. Coming back to our news bulletin, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas arrived in Jenin for a visit on Wednesday, a week after the Zionist occupying forces carried out its biggest raid on the city in years. The attack killed innocent Palestinians and left a trail of wrecked streets and sparked fury across the Arab world.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas paid his first visit since 2005 to the occupied West Bank's Jenin refugee camp on Wednesday in the wake of an Israeli offensive launched last week, as he announced the reconstruction of the camp while expressing his gratitude to everyone who supported Jenin.
We came today to follow up on the reconstruction of the city and the camp, to bring it back to the way it used to be and even better than before. We must use this to challenge everyone who is trying to defeat us, everyone who is trying to assault us. We will not allow anyone to assault us, and we will remain strong.
His first stop at the camp was the cemetery of Jenin, where he laid a wreath at the graves of Palestinian martyrs killed in last week's raid, to later address a tightly packed crowd of residents in the camp for the first time in years. The Palestinian leader's visit came a week after Israel launched a massive two-day military attack there, the largest in the West Bank in nearly 2 decades, that killed at least 12 Palestinians, wounded around 100, forced thousands to flee their homes, and left large swaths of the camp in ruins, in an incursion that began with late-night drone strikes, followed by a sweep involving more than 1,000 Israeli troops.
Let me say frankly that the hand that comes for the unity of the people, their security, safety and stability will be cut off at the root. We won't leave this camp until God inherits the land and everything on it, and until these occupiers leave our land after soiling it for decades.
On the same day, and since the early hours of the morning, several areas of the West Bank were the scene of a large-scale arrest operation, including freshly released prisoners who were arrested under false pretexts. Settlers also stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque in successive groups, carried out provocative tours in its courtyards, and performed Talmudic rituals near its gates. For well over a year, Zionist aggression on cities like Jenin, Nablus and Al-Aqsa have become a routine. Hundreds of Palestinians, including fighters and civilians, have been killed.
European MPs unit to denounce the plundering of natural resources in Western Sahara and illegal agreements with Morocco. Hussein Burkan on this story.
In a strong message against the plundering of natural resources in Western Sahara, European deputies from different countries and political currents gathered at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. They voiced their opposition to the inclusion of occupied Sahrawi territories in illegal agreements between the European Union and Morocco, just a week before the current fishing agreement is set to expire. The slogans of Western Sahara is not for sale and Stop Looting echoed within the walls of the European Parliament. European deputies, part of the European Joint Caucus in support of Western Sahara, expressed their commitment to international legitimacy and their unwavering support for the political, social, and economic rights of the Sahrawi people.
The renewal of these agreements under previous circumstances seem unlikely. It poses significant challenges.
To break this impasse, the Polisario Front proposed granting direct fishing license to Spanish fishermen for 1 year, aiming to negotiate all aspects related to the exploitation of natural resources in Western Sahara.
We are determined to negotiate all aspects of natural resources exploitation in Western Sahara, considering the existence of a legal framework that allows for economic activity despite the occupation. The fishing licenses granted by the Polisario Front will adhere to the quotas and standards outlined in the agreement with Morocco, ensuring the safety of fishermen in the exclusive waters of Western Sahara.
As the European judiciary deliberates on the agreement, which has been overturned 3 times due to its inapplicability to Western Sahara, the European Union finds itself at a crossroads. It must choose between the path of legitimacy, respecting international law, or supporting the Moroccan exploitation of Sahrawi wealth. The outcome of this crucial decision will have a significant impact on the future of Western Sahara and the right of its people.
Algeria is heading towards achieving historical figure of $13 billion by the end of the current year in its exports outside hydrocarbons, a quantum leap recorded in light of the many facilitations and incentives taken by the Algerian authorities. Mohamed Khatou.
Algeria has managed to achieve in 3 years what it failed to achieve in more than 6 decades. For many years, the volume of exports outside hydrocarbon did not exceed the threshold of $1 billion. After reaching $7 billion last year, the country's exports are heading towards a new historical record of nearly $13 billion by the end of the current year, as announced by Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune.
في سنة 2021 لما قلنا باش نوصل ل $5 ملايير، يعني بعض الأصوات سخرية، الجزائر ولات سخرية، خليهم يحلموا، وصلنا ل $5 ملايير الحمد لله. ومن بعد طلعنا السقف إلى 7 ملايير، ورانا على وشك وصلنا على 7 ملايير تاعنا، وصلنا ورانا على وشك تاع $13 مليار تصدير خارج المحروقات.
The unprecedented record figures in the history of the Algerian economy are likely to rise thanks to the human and natural resources that the country enjoys. All this is supported by the various measures that have recently been taken by the authorities.
The government expects reaching $13 billion. This emanates from the strategy and from the improved business environment in general. There is momentum and there is a will from the public authorities, and this level is clear evidence. However, can reach higher levels in the next phases because we use less than 20% of our capabilities.
Increasing the volume of Algerian exports outside hydrocarbon, developing a strategy to support Algerian exporters, and lifting the obstacles they are confronted with will now be possible thanks to the portal of the Higher Council of Exporters, whose official creation was also announced by the President of the Republic.
Creating this system to implement this agreement to define the future strategy and organize branches and participation in international fairs in order to make Algerian products known. It will be a space for discussion and especially for concluding contracts over the next phases. This council will be a direct guidance for investors.
The qualitative leap in the volume of Algerian exports comes after several measures taken by the Algerian authorities, foremost of which is the promulgation of the new investment law, in addition to the opening of banks in some African countries and linking their capitals with Algeria through the opening of sea and air lines with the aim of launching free zones with Mauritania, Mali and Niger with regard to agricultural products.
A statement from the Algerian Ministry of Defense revealed that attempts to bring in more than 8 quintals of treated cannabis were thwarted across the border with Morocco, and about 160,000 drug tablets were seized and 56 drug dealers were arrested in the same region. Tunisian President Kais Saied confirmed that social media platforms are no longer communication networks, but have turned into tools used by well-known circles inside and outside the country to deal a blow to the country's national security. During his meeting with the Minister of Communication Technologies, Nizar Ben Naji, Kais Saied stressed that practices such as threatening lives and vowing to revenge have nothing to do with freedom of expression, but are rather actions criminalized by law. He stressed that these practices will not prevent Tunisians from moving forward, adding that the state is not managed by rumors and fabrication. The head of the Libyan National Unity Government, Abdelhamid Ad-Dabeiba, received on Tuesday evening the Italian ambassador to Libya, Gianluca Alberini. According to a statement of the Unity Government during the meeting, Ad-Dabeiba stressed the depth of relations between the two countries, stressing the need to activate the results of his recent visit to Rome regarding the convening of the Libyan-Italian Economic Forum and to unify joint efforts in combating irregular migration. For his part, Alberini expressed Italy's support for all international efforts to hold fair elections in Libya. The Ministry of Health in Al Khartoum, Sudan, reported that indiscriminate bombing targeted a popular market in the city of Durman, killing 34 people, including children, while no statement was issued neither by the army nor by the rapid support forces regarding the bombing, which comes at a time when violent clashes intensified, causing displacement of more than 3 million people. The bombing prompted the United Nations to demand accountability for those responsible for this humanitarian situation in the country and deepening the crisis, which, according to the head of the UN mission in Sudan, Volker Perthes, is turning into regional crisis and ethnic conflict.
They have to do, but accountability is a much broader concept than only a judicial one. It is at least for my job, it is also a political concept. It is about what the Sudanese people would allow the leaders of the warring parties to have any leadership function after this war. To put it into one sentence, perhaps, we still need the leaders of the warring parties, the generals, to end that war. But I don't think that they can have a role in building peace after that war.
In Africa, still, Somalia announced on Tuesday the elimination of 50 terrorists from Al-Shabaab movement, including leaders, during a military operation in the south of the country. Local media sources said that the armed forces and the forces of Jubaland state launched a joint operation in Wilmero state, south of the Lower Juba region, which resulted in the elimination of 50 members of the terrorist groups.
What also made us face heavy resistance.
Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi landed on Wednesday in Uganda, where he was received by his Ugandan counterpart as he continued the 3-country tour of Africa, which started from Kenya and that Tehran has dubbed as a new beginning in relations with the continent. racist trip to Africa, which has seen him visit Kenya and will also take him to Zimbabwe, is the first by an Iranian president in more than a decade that represents a bid to diversify Iran's trade relations. Raisi signed 4 agreements with President Yoweri Museveni and said that Iran stood ready to share its experience regarding planned 60,000 barrel per day oil refinery. The United Nations Human Rights Council on Wednesday approved a disputed resolution on religious hatred in the wake of burning of a Quran in Sweden, prompting concern by Western states who say it challenges long-held practices in rights protection. The resolution introduced by the 57 Islamic and Arabic Nation Organization of Islamic Cooperation calls for the UN Rights Chief to publish a report on religious hatred and for states to review their laws and plug gaps that might obstruct the prevention and prosecution of acts and advocacy of religious hatred.
Is therefore adopted.
In voting against the resolution, a message has been sent to billions of people of faith across the world that their commitment to prevent religious hatred is merely a lip service.
To the European continent, NATO members have said that they want Ukraine in the alliance when the time is right, while Moscow said that the decision was a big mistake. Miriam Zian.
Amidst an era of great power rivalry and strategic competition, NATO has closed its 2-day summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, making important decisions with an emphasis on supporting Ukraine and its membership into the military alliance.
From now on, NATO and Ukraine will meet in the Council to discuss and decide as equals. This is a significant step to move Ukraine closer to NATO. I also welcome the major new announcements of military support made by NATO allies at this summit.
However, NATO neither established a timetable nor provided details on how Ukraine would become a member, prompting critiques from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And despite the ambiguous language of the summit's final declaration, Kiev didn't leave empty-handed. It will benefit from long-term security assistance, modern military equipment, and economic assistance from the Group of Seven.
Today, the members of the G7 are launching a joint declaration of support for Ukraine to make it clear that our support will last long into the future. This starts a process by which each of our nations and any other nation who wishes to participate will negotiate long-term bilateral security commitments with and to Ukraine. We're going to help Ukraine build a strong, capable defense across land, air, and sea.
The Ukrainian president has welcomed the pledges by G7 despite his concern over the conditions of joining one of the world's most powerful military blocs.
I have not changed my point of view. The most important thing is that we equally understand the conditions of when and how Ukraine will join NATO. Maybe someone does not communicate all the details. Still, nevertheless, it was essential for me that there is an unequivocal fact that Ukraine will be in NATO, and it depends on security that no one will trade NATO membership with anyone.
These decisions have aroused a quick reaction, with Moscow describing them as dangerous, saying they could trigger a third world war.
In the same line of thought, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance is not letting Ukraine join while the conflict with Russia is going on, but has launched a NATO-Ukraine Council as part of its political commitment to the country. He also reiterated the ongoing commitment of the organization to Ukraine, saying we will stand by them for as long as it takes.
We reaffirm that Ukraine will become a member. We actually have agreed on concrete tools, political tools, practical tools to help Ukraine move towards membership. And then, of course, everyone understands that a final decision on this cannot be taken before there is some kind of end to this war.
The Kremlin stated that the security guarantees being considered by the West for Ukraine would be a dangerous miscalculation that would jeopardize Russia's security and expose Europe to bigger threats for many years to come. Moscow believes one of the key reasons it initiated its special military operation in Ukraine last year was to strengthen its own security in the face of what it sees as an ever-expanding NATO and an aggressive militarized Ukraine.
Our attitude towards Ukraine joining NATO is very negative. The decision is directly correlated with the statement that the G7 countries would provide the security assurances to Ukraine and announce this fact today. We consider this decision as a mistake and a potentially very dangerous one, because providing any security guarantees to Ukraine, these countries effectively ignore the international principle of indivisibility of security. That said, providing security guarantees to Ukraine, they encroach the Russian Federation's security. This is impossible. This is fraught with very short, medium, and long-term negative consequences.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in an interview with an Indonesian newspaper published on Wednesday that the armed confrontation in Ukraine will continue until the West gives up plans to dominate and defeat Moscow. The goal of US-led collective West is to strengthen its global domination.
Why doesn't the armed confrontation in Ukraine come to an end? The answer is very simple. It will continue until the West gives up its plans to preserve its domination and overcome its obsessive desire to inflict a Russian strategic defeat at the hands of its Kiev puppets.
To a different matter now, North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile off its east coast, provoking condemnation from the United States as well as South Korean and Japanese officials who gathered on the sidelines of NATO summit. The launch followed North Korea's previous complaints in which it accused American spy planes of flying over its exclusive economic zone, condemned a recent visit to South Korea by an American nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine, and threatened to take action.
North Korea's series of actions, including its repeated ballistic missile launches, threaten the peace and security of Japan's region and the international community, and are absolutely unacceptable.
The U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Affairs John Kerry will visit China. According to the U.S. State Department, Kerry's visit, scheduled for July 16 and 19, is his third to Beijing since he took office under President Joe Biden. He is also the third senior U.S. official to visit China. In recent weeks, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Beijing last month in nearly 5 years, followed by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen last week. And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup by Marim Sian.
Greece and Turkey agreed on Wednesday to break the political deadlock and resume talks and confidence-building measures after more than a year of bitter relations and tensions over defense issues. The two countries within the NATO bloc have been at odds for decades over a range of issues, including where their continental shelves start and end.
Firefighters in southwestern Turkey battled to contain a wildfire near the tourist peninsula of Mugla on Wednesday. The cause of the fire, which began around 3 p.m. local time, remained unclear. Officials said 615 personnel, 14 helicopters, and 11 planes were involved in tackling the blaze.
Tensions remained high along Lebanon's border with the Zionist entity after an explosion hit the border and injured at least 3 Hezbollah members. So far, nothing has been proven about who is to blame for this occurrence, since the United Nations peacekeeping forces along Lebanon's southern border, known as UNIFIL, have stated that they are examining the case.
A police spokesman said officers murdered 6 people during new protests in Kenya against rising living costs on Wednesday, while a health worker said more than 50 kids were tear-gassed in the capital, Nairobi. According to the same sources, the 6 people murdered were shot for disrupting businesses without going into further detail.
Ending up with a related sport event in a large arena lit by bouncing neon lights, gamers from around the world take part in Saudi Arabia's esports festival entitled Gamers 8, the Land of Heroes. The competition, organized by Saudi's Esports Federation, has combined $45 million prize pool distributed among 15 tournaments, including the FIFA Club World Cup. Driven by more than 21 million gamers in Saudi Arabia, the kingdom's Esports Federation is hoping to make Saudi the hub for sports in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us in this late hour. For more updates, and if you want to rewatch our news, you can follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, take care of yourself. Good night.